I think religion is the fundamental enemy, both in a kind of explicitly religious form, that is actual religious people advocating that we become more religious, that we inform our politics through religion, but also by secular people. It's the source of all of the bad ideas in our culture.
I'm Tal Tsfany. At 40, I was introduced to a philosophy that transformed my life. My passion is applying philosophical principles towards a better, I might add, heroic life. Join me as I sit down with people that I find inspiring, guided by their authentic values that define who and how they pursue their happiness. These high-achieving individuals aren't just living a good enough life, they're flourishing. This is the Happiest Man Alive. Today I'm interviewing someone that I'm proud to call a friend and a colleague. And instead of doing the normal introduction, I want to do something quite risky, which is, I call it the Don hypothesis. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Don hypothesis, see what you think about it.
Let's do it.
Don Watkins is a human interested in humans. He is fascinated by what makes them who they are, what moves them, what interests them, and mainly how big ideas shape their lives. He's a romantic, a man of the word and of deep emotions. He loves to love. He loves to admire. He loves life. His relation with life is a continuous sense of awe and reverence for the grandeur of man's potentiality and for the people who show us the unlimited scope of that potentiality. Don thinks through writing and words. It is his sacred place of quiet contemplation and integration. His motivation is understanding big ideas for the purpose of making them accessible and understandable to all of us. Don is driven by a sense of justice for the people who make our quality of life possible, and he's on a mission to do them justice, the entrepreneurs, the builders, the scientists, the artists, and for his own kind, the thinkers.
Accurate. The only person who's ever said anything more accurate about me is my wife.
Wow, I'll take that as a big compliment. So Don, let me start by asking you a question that seems obvious, but for us, people who deal with happiness all the time, it's not that obvious. Are you a happy person?
You know, it's a funny question. I think it's the most important question in life, but it's really the most personal question you can ask a person. Because happiness is really about, have you achieved your fundamental values? And so in revealing your answer, you're telling people about how you feel about your career, your friends, your sex life. Like
you're not answering the question.
I'm not, I will answer, but I'm just saying I don't answer it lightly. Yes. Now. It took a long time.
Yeah. What are you really, really good at? What is your most enjoyable activity when you're not writing?
Talking about ideas. And it doesn't have to be big abstract ideas, but it's talking about things that are really interesting to me with people who are really interesting. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, essentially all I do is I work and then I go on walks with my wife and my pug and my kids and talk about ideas.
What do you do for fun, like pure fun, relaxation?
That is pure fun.
That is, wow. You don't waste time?
Oh, I waste a lot of time. Mostly by reading.
That's not a waste.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. No, I mean, and, you know, watch a lot of TV. But again, I don't think of it as wasted in the sense of it's for pure enjoyment. The times when I feel like I've wasted time are where, you know, it's procrastinating, right? But I got to the point in life where I find that I procrastinate when I don't have that much to do. If I have a lot to do, and I'm sure you have this experience, right? You have a to-do list that would take 10 years to get through, and I have one that's, let's call it 5 years. When you're in that state, procrastination it's very unlikely to come up. There was one idea that I learned in two different ways at two different moments. So I got interested in philosophy the first time I remember hearing a philosophic idea, which is I used to take martial arts when I was a kid. And my favorite part of class was at the end of class where our sensei would give some Zen saying. And I'd be like, oh, wow, cool, you can know stuff about life. And then got into, dabbled in some Nietzsche when I was 14 and some atheist works when I was about 14, and then discovered Ayn Rand when I was 15. And what was striking was I had never thought about productive work as an important issue in life. I didn't really think about what did I want to do. That didn't seem important. I just wanted to like learn about stuff. And the fact that she put production front and center, and that she as a philosopher had an admiration for businessmen. They weren't producing ideas, they were producing material wealth. And yet she thought that was profoundly admirable. So that idea that the meaning of life is really centered around your productive career was a revelation for me. And developing a real admiration for material producers was a revelation for me.
And that was when you read Atlas, or
before I discovered Ayn Rand when I was 15. I read Atlas like a year later. But then that was still kind of an abstract appreciation. Like, okay, careers sound great. Producers are amazing. But it was when I was working at the Institute, at first trying to become a writer. And I mentioned my friend Alex Epstein. He worked at the Institute in those days. And he made an offhanded reference to some marketer that he had read. I said, I'm marketing ideas. Maybe I should study marketing. And so started doing that and just became fascinated by it. And it was that moment that I really realized, wow, producers are all solving the same problem. They're solving the problem of how we navigate our way through reality. And they have a lot of knowledge that's valuable to me as somebody interested in philosophy. Let me mine it. Let me take it, because it's probably being underutilized by philosophic thinkers, right? They're not studying the business greats, and they're not studying marketing and sales. And so that became the start of in many ways, my mining career. I'd always been interested in philosophy, but that, I think, opened the floodgates to being, how can I use everything that's out there?
Who do you admire other than Ayn Rand, truly admire?
I mean, the list is really long, but there's a few people who immediately jump to mind. I really admire Steve Jobs. Not every aspect of his personality, but one of the hallmarks of great minds is that they understand complexity and they can present it simply without oversimplifying. And this is a really profound insight in life. I discovered Ayn Rand, and she made philosophy seem so simple. And then part of your growth is you realize, oh no, it's actually really complex. And you start immersing yourself in the complexity, and you kind of become overwhelmed. You don't feel oriented anymore. But then as you grow in mastery, it starts getting simple again. But it's a simplicity that contains the complexity.
Simplicity, complexity, and informed simplicity.
Exactly. And Jobs has that same ability that Rand does in his domain, which is he understood the complexity. You can't create a company like Apple without understanding a lot about people, sales, design, manufacturing, accounting. And yet, he can sit down and explain, hey, I have this new product, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and you know everything you need to know about the product. So he's been one major influence in just admiring the way that his mind works. And then the other person who I'll definitely mention is Benjamin Franklin.
Really? Wow.
Growing up, I admired the founders, but not really Franklin so much. He wasn't an intellectual like Jefferson. He wasn't, Madison in many ways is the founding father I most identify with intellectually, because he had the deepest understanding of rights and of the kind of mechanics of government. And, Hamilton had a musical. So but Franklin always seemed he never really kind of struck me as that interesting until the more I learned about him and realized he's actually the epitome of what I admire in life. He brings together everything I regard as important, right? He's an entrepreneur and successful businessman. He is a scientific discoverer of new knowledge. He's an innovator who translates that knowledge into technological achievements, and he's a fighter for freedom. I mean, essentially, he's John Galt before there was a John Galt. And to really appreciate that's the Enlightenment way of life contained in one person. And then once you realize that you couldn't have had the American Revolution without him, he and Washington were the two most indispensable contributors, I can't overstate.
What biography should I read about Benjamin?
I mean, there's a lot of good ones. One that is particularly good is by Gordon Wood. And then his autobiography, though you can't trust it fully as history, it is, a quick read that will stay with you your entire life.
You're in the process of writing a new book about religion called Christianity versus the West. So why religion?
Well, one thing I should say is it was really the first philosophic issue that I got interested in. I was confirmed as a Methodist when I was 13. And like a month later, I said, I should probably think about which religion is true, like not just accept the one that I grew up with. And once I encountered the viewpoint of atheism and the idea of you should only accept ideas on the basis of reason. And once I was convinced there was no reason to believe that a God exists, I said, okay, I'm an atheist. And it was as quick as that. So religion was the way I got interested in philosophy. I eventually became less interested because religion is just what I think is a false philosophy. And I was interested in what's true. But when I reflect on what are the biggest threats to my values today, to reason, to freedom, to people living a Benjamin Franklin way of life, I think religion is the fundamental enemy, both in a kind of explicitly religious form, that is actual religious people advocating that we become more religious, that we inform our politics through religion, but also by secular people. I think you can't understand, what's often called like the woke left, the egalitarian left, unless you see it as its secularized religion. It's the source of all of the bad ideas in our culture. Now, to say it's the source is not to say that it's the only source. I think you can look at it from different perspectives. You can talk about really we're the result of a culture that accepts the ideas of Plato, but we've accepted them as they were communicated through Christianity. Christianity absorbed the Platonic outlook on life where this world's not that important, it's only semi-real, and what we should be serving are otherworldly ideals. That is a Platonic idea, but the reason that those ideas have stuck is it came to us through Christianity. Or Ayn Rand thought that the most evil and influential philosopher in the modern world was Immanuel Kant. But Kant just took Christian ideas and provided them with a secular kind of framing.
Aren't you thinking of religion as everything that is kind of mystical, epistemologically, everything that is not this worldly? Is that the code name for religion, or are you talking about the cultural movement that Christianity is?
I'm talking about the basic ideals of Christianity. If you take what are the essential doctrines, the most essential doctrines, there's some debate, but most Christians will put it as it's the creation, the fall, and mankind being saved through Jesus Christ. What do those ideas mean? Well, the creation is that there's a higher world which produced this lower world. And then human beings were brought into this world and committed the original sin of disobedience against God, driven by pride, self-love, that basically meant that we have to suffer in this world and hope for reward in the next. And how are we going to get that reward? By subordinating the values of this world, wealth, pride, pleasure, to the values of the next world, faith, sacrifice, obedience to God's plan. And the core orientation then is otherworldly, that it's a demotion of this world, it's a demotion of our means of knowing this world, subordination of reason to faith, and it's the subordination of the values of this world, the giving up the pursuit of earthly happiness for the alleged sake of otherworldly happiness. Those ideas, I think, are what are shaping our world and moving it in a really bad direction.
So a lot of people, think about America as an evolution of Christianity, right? Coming out of Christianity. The founding fathers and so many before them were Christian thinkers. And I remember going to my daughter's campus, which is highly religious, and for them, Enlightenment and Christianity are one. So how do you think about the relationship between Enlightenment and what brought America to be versus Christianity? What is that relationship there?
That's the big story that we tell in the book. But the core thing that you have to realize is that what was happening in the West, Christianity basically had 500 years where what I call earthly ideals, the ideals of reason and earthly happiness that was really epitomized by Aristotle's philosophy and the kind of culture of ancient Greece, or at least ancient Athens, that vanished. And all you had was otherworldly ideals dominate for 500 years. And we called those 500 years the Dark Ages. At the same time, in the Islamic world, they were imbibing Greek philosophy and had their golden age. So there you had earthly idealism and no Christianity, and it was a thriving situation. Dark Ages, you have Christianity, no earthly idealism. And then around the 1100s, the Christian West started rediscovering the ancients and above all Aristotle.
Through Aquinas.
Well, no, he was one of many thinkers who were bringing back Aristotle who were excited by the ideas of Aristotle. But there were a number of these thinkers, and what you had was a rebirth that kind of came to fruition most notably during the Renaissance, where people were still religious, but they weren't focused on religion. They weren't focused on the next world. It was kind of taken for granted, and they wanted to revive learning. They wanted to revive the arts. And then it really climaxes during the Enlightenment. And during the Enlightenment, it's not that people became anti-religious, though some did, but religion had to bend the knee to reason. That is, reason finally set the terms. And so the way that our colleague Onkar Ghate puts it is that it was during the Enlightenment that religion or Christianity was defanged. And just to give you one example of what that meant. So Aquinas, for example, is trying to reconcile reason and faith, and Aristotle and Augustine. You can think about it that way. And so he thought, well, there's the domain of faith and the domain of reason, and there's a place where they overlap, and they're both legitimate means to knowledge. They can never contradict each other, but really faith is the highest. Like, that's the most secure form of knowledge, is what we get through revelation. And Locke, who's really, I think, the epitome, the best thinker of the Enlightenment. Now, Locke's a Christian. I'll come back to that. But he's a pious believer in Christ. He thinks of himself as a Christian. And he says, no, everything has to come before the tribunal for reason. Even revelation, and he certainly believes in biblical revelation, has to prove itself to be revelation by reason. And so what the Enlightenment essentially is it's upholding reason. And yes, religion has its role to play, but that it has to justify itself before reason. Now, I put a pin in, is he a Christian? Because this is true for the founders as well. By the standards of orthodoxy, they weren't. I mean, most of them deny the Trinity, which is an essential doctrine of Orthodox Christianity. Some of them, like John Adams, doesn't even think Jesus isn't God. That's crazy. He was their major view of what was positive about Christianity is they thought religion was a vital source of morality, that you needed religion in order to have morality. And I think they were simply wrong.
So they're questioning the epistemology of faith, but they still accept the morality, the Christian morality, or it's the source of morality.
Yeah, and they wouldn't even put it as the Christian morality. If you read, for instance, Thomas Jefferson talking about this issue, he thinks that the kind of morality that you need to have a free society are the moral principles that all religions agree on, not distinctively Christian ones. They're explicit about this. It's things like you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't try to get ahead at other people's expense. And they thought you needed kind of religion to keep people from pursuing their interests in ways that were damaging to others. I think you can justify morality on rational principles, and I don't think a person's interests, if they really understand them, include taking advantage of other people. I think that's actually bad for you. But that was the thing with the Enlightenment. They were breaking away from religion, but they didn't fully break away with it precisely over this issue of morality. But everything good in the Enlightenment came from their devotion to reason and the pursuit of earthly happiness, the value of earthly happiness. And that it was those ideas that made possible America. And yeah, did that mean they rejected religion? No, they embraced it to an extent, and that's what's holding us back, is that they didn't go far enough in rejecting religion.
So what do you say to everyone that says, J.D. Vance come to mind, like we should go back to the founding fathers, the Christians who created this country? What would you tell them about the essence of their error?
The essence of their error is to not recognize that what was distinctively Christian in Western culture is an otherworldly ideal that in its pure form leads to the Dark Ages and has contributed nothing positive to the creation of learning, science, freedom, and progress.
And America is based on the age of reason. What is the essence of that?
It's the essence of it is earthly idealism that values reason as our means of knowing the world and the pursuit of earthly happiness as the moral quest that we should be centered upon promoting. And look, it's not fully honest people who say, oh, the Enlightenment, this was, the great achievement of religion. If you look at what was happening during the Enlightenment to all of the thinkers who were defining the Enlightenment, they were often at the mercy of people trying to impose Christianity on them. Diderot was put into prison late in the Enlightenment. Spinoza was basically on the run and managed to escape jail just because he found, the one place that had the most free thought. If you think about somebody like Descartes, so we all know the story of Galileo, who is, sentenced to house arrest by the Inquisition because he refused to bow to the church's insistence that he not promote the idea that the earth revolves around the sun. Well, Descartes self-censored and explicitly says, I'm not going to publish anything on that because I don't want to have a run-in with the church. Or the encyclopedia of the Enlightenment thinkers like Diderot were creating. The authorities were trying to censor it all the time because they're attacking religion. So at every step, it's people willing to challenge religious authorities that are creating the Enlightenment. And then so to credit the Enlightenment's achievements to Christianity is just insane and unjust.
So I want to double click on what was missing. And think about giants like Locke, like Jefferson. What was missing in their understanding about the nature of reason and faith for them to close that gap? Is it what we call today the is-ought gap? Or like where morality comes from? Where is it grounded? And I want to quote something that I read in the introduction where even Jordan Peterson says that, if you leave Christianity, if you let it die, then what you get is nihilism. So in a way, this is-ought gap, or if you think about Dennis Prager saying, if Christianity is out, then murder is good. What's missing? What did Ayn Rand bring to the table that, in a way, closes that gap?
The Enlightenment had a pretty bad account of reason. Even the best thinkers did not have a good understanding of reason. They valued reason. They thought it was a great thing. But if you ask, well, what is reason and how does it work? It's kind of a mess at a philosophic level. If you take Locke, for instance, Locke accepts this idea that, well, we don't perceive reality directly. So what reason is it's logical inference based on observation, basically. So it's really important that observation work. But his view is, well, we don't perceive reality directly. We don't observe reality. What we get are ideas about reality. And so, I don't perceive the moon when I look up at the moon. I basically perceive my picture of the moon. Well, does that match reality? We can never really know. So it's that's laying the groundwork for skeptics like Hume to come along and say, yeah, we can't really know reality. So the account of reason is a complete mess. It's even worse on the issue of morality. Now, there's two senses in which the Enlightenment doesn't solve the problem of irrational morality. You mentioned the is-ought gap. That's kind of, let's put it, how do you justify a morality of reason? That's an unsolved problem. People are struggling to solve it. I think it's the less important problem. The real problem is, what morality were they trying to justify? And essentially, in whole or in part, they were still treating the Sermon on the Mount. It's one reason they couldn't find a rational justification for it. because there is no rational justification for you should give up your values, you should give up happiness. And even Locke, who's implicitly pro-self-interest, I mean, you can't read his second treatise on government without saying, here's somebody who values the individual's pursuit of happiness, values the quest for self-preservation. But when it came to his explicit moral views, he says right out that like the most perfect morality is the one that Jesus gave us. You can't have a morality, some of the things we admire most are the person who sacrifices himself.
What about Jefferson and the Jeffersonian Bible and all of that? Is that an improvement of this, or?
Well, that's a perfect example of what the Enlightenment did. So Jefferson's Bible, he basically edits out of the New Testament all of the miracles, but keeps all the ethical teachings. And so almost everything during the Enlightenment, in some form or another, is holding on to Christian morality. They're often trying to bring in self-interest and kind of cast it as something that's good, or at least not exactly good. It's in effect, look, this is an inherent part of human nature, and as long as you keep it under control and don't take it too far, then it's a perfectly fine thing. But there's no moral defense of dedicating yourself to the pursuit of your own happiness. And so it's both not having a rational justification for morality and not having a conception of morality that it's about the individual's achievement of happiness, that's his primary moral goal. The Enlightenment had neither of those.
So we're now paying the prices of those gaps, if you will, right? So let's move to the positive. I mean, what is the alternative? How do you think about continuing this project of the Enlightenment? What will it take to bring us back to maybe a new renaissance of reason?
Well, first of all, let me say, I think it's good that you're asking that question, what's the positive? So about what has it been now, 10, 15 years ago, the new atheists became very big. And I think they were courageous, stepping, this was the aftermath of 9/11. And they were saying religion is a really negative force, but they were essentially critics. They didn't have a lot of positive guidance to offer. And I think one of the reasons that in the last few years, you've had more and more people, including secular people, go, yeah, maybe religion is not so bad. And maybe those new atheists were kind of annoying jerks, is because they didn't have a positive to offer. It was tearing down something that needed to be torn down. But if you don't offer anything positive in its place, because religion fills a need, and that basic need, the rational need that a person has, is they need guidance. They need a framework, a basic view of life. And above all, they need a moral ideal. And if you don't have anything to say about morality, and what the new atheists had to say about morality was, would you believe it or not, yeah, we can have Christian morality without Christ. Okay. Well, then now you're tearing down the basis that makes that make sense. And so I do think it's vital to, I'm not essentially anti-religious. I'm essentially pro-reason and pro-human flourishing, pro-people building a life that they love and a self that they love. And I think that if you are looking out at the world today and thinking, how do you, in effect, revive the Enlightenment and build on the Enlightenment? Because the Enlightenment was not perfect. It wasn't perfect philosophically. It wasn't perfect in any respect. What it was human beings had advanced civilization way more than at any other time in history. They had discovered freedom. They had put reason in the driver's seat. But we can make it even better. We can take things even further. We can make progress even better. And so what you need to defend the values that civilization is based on. You need to have an account of reason and create a culture that really idolizes reason. And you need to have a culture that values the pursuit of happiness and valorizes the pursuit of happiness. That is the thing that Ayn Rand uniquely provides, is that philosophic account of reason, that philosophical defense of the pursuit of happiness that allows us to really provide the Enlightenment with what it didn't have, which is a philosophic basis that was secure.
So what is your evaluation of where we are right now historically? I mean, you see kind of the false dichotomy of people, going extreme left and woke and crazy, and then the the response to that is people going back to Christianity and the kind of mystic right, and there's a big void in the middle, and people are completely confused about those. Where do you think historically we are? Is there an opportunity, like a void in the middle of a vacuum for ideas? And how does that relate to objectivism as a movement?
So I think what we're in the grips of is a battle between two nihilistic groups. Groups is probably too strong because it's not exactly like two organized regimes, but you essentially have the secular nihilists who hate the Enlightenment and everything it stands for because they think it stands for exploitation, and that's kind of the woke egalitarians. But then you have the Christian nihilists who are enemies of the Enlightenment because it's overthrowing faith and tradition. So people are being forced to choose between two nihilistic groups, and those groups play off of each other. And so, for instance, the more that people see, one side attacking science, they flee into the hands of the left, right? Well, at least these people aren't anti-science. And the more that the left is attacking the founding fathers in America, the more that people who value America flee into the arms of the right. And so better people are latching themselves onto nihilists mostly because they see the problems in the other side. And so to the extent that there's an opportunity, it's that most people aren't nihilists. They're embracing nihilism because it seems the only alternative to whatever is the most obviously nihilistic force from their perspective in the culture. And so what you want to provide is a positive alternative that avoids the evils of both sides and has something really better to offer. But the problem is that, or let's call it the challenge. The challenge is that it takes a lot of mental work and courage to look outside the mainstream and question the mainstream. Like what we're asking people to do is question religion, question the morality you've been brought up with, question the political, system that people have been taking for granted. Like that's a lot to expect of people. It's possible. We've seen cultures radically improve. The Enlightenment came essentially over the course of a few centuries. The Renaissance and the Enlightenment came out of the Dark Ages. Again, it took centuries, but things can improve. One of our colleagues in the archives, Brandon Lisi, likes to tell the story of you had in America in the 1600s, a place that's prosecuting people for witchcraft, and 100 years later, like the height of freedom and Enlightenment values. Like you can have change for the better, but it takes a lot of work.
What is the problem that you find? You trying to communicate ideas for a long time now, and for some of us, it seems easy, not easy, but not impossible to question everything. Like, show me something that makes more sense and I'll drop my beliefs in a second. But for most people walking this earth, they cling on to whatever they currently believe in as if it's like those are crutches they need in order to walk. Psychologically, what have you found is the reason, and maybe religion has a lot to do with it, that people cannot be persuaded, even if you show them truth right in front of their eyes and you show them the contradictions that they hold, and they still hold on to their beliefs? What do you think is going on there?
Well, at one level, the answer is people have free will, and so nothing can make them think. And that's where people are particularly resistant of questioning things that they've based their identity and their self-esteem on. And a lot of people have based their identity and self-esteem on the approval of others, the approval of their parents, the approval of their peer group, and that makes them not question. But if you ask me how I think about it, I actually think about it slightly differently, which is my starting assumption is if people don't agree with me, it's because we haven't made the case good enough. If you make a good enough case, they'll agree. They'll see. Some won't. Some will continue to evade. But I think in many ways it's just we haven't made the case well enough, and that's what gets me up out of bed and writing the books that I do. Of I see this. It must not be obvious to other people. Can I make it overwhelmingly obvious, such that yeah, of course, that's the reaction a person should have. If I've done my job is Oh, of course.
What are the opportunities that you see that you didn't see maybe 10, 20 years ago? And what still are the kind of the main obstacles in front of us?
Well, I'll start by Dan Sullivan, that coach that you had us do that unique ability exercise with. He has this concept he calls the gap in the gain. And both perspectives are important, but we often focus on the gap. The gap is where I am versus where I want to be. And he says, you need that because that's what orients you, and that's your ambition, right? But if that's all you focus on, you're going to feel really dispirited because that gap's always going to be there and it will haunt you. You need to focus on the gain. Where am I versus where I was? And when I think about objectivism as a movement, I got involved in the mid-90s. I think aside from Ayn Rand's books, during the whole of the 90s, objectivists published, 4 or 5 books that I'm aware of. I've written more than that just myself, in the time since. But there's more intellectuals doing more work, having more influence than ever before. ARI has grown by leaps and bounds. When I got involved in objectivism, the first thing that I did was I wrote a letter to the Institute saying like, hey, I'm 15, I'm super excited. What do you guys have for me? How can I get involved? And Michael Berliner, the first head of the Institute, wrote back and said, well, we have a program for graduate students. So when you're a graduate student, let us know. Well, I'm 15. I don't even know what graduate school is, but I certainly know it's not, for me now. Today, the moment you encounter Ayn Rand, there's a golden path laid out for you to learn everything that you can. It's all at your fingertips, all kinds of programs to educate you. If you want to have a career as an intellectual, which I did, hey, we'll actively help you do it. We'll work with you. We'll give you money. We have, even jobs available depending on your, that amount of growth is amazing. And so when I think about the gain just in that short amount of time has been enormous. And, where I think the opportunity is, honestly, at the end of the day, I think the biggest opportunity is get more people to read Ayn Rand. If the best thinkers are encountering Ayn Rand when they're young and still forming their view of the world, a number of them are going to, the ideas will resonate with. And if, we continue to attract great minds, all you have to do is unleash them on the world, because at the end of the day, everything else in a culture is downstream of the intellectuals. That's really the lesson of the Enlightenment, is that when the leading thinkers move in a pro-reason, pro-worldly happiness direction, you can overcome a lot of bad stuff in a culture and really create, a magnificent jump in civilization. I'll just mention, we give away hundreds of thousands of copies of her novels each year. We have the biggest essay contests each year. And I think, building on that foundation and finding more ways to bring the ideas alive for people, that is the core of the work.
In the process of building the Don Watkins hypothesis, I had to watch some videos, and I caught a video with you and Dave Rubin 9 years ago. And he's asking you about Trump. And you said something that I found amazing, almost prophetic. You said, what worries me is the part that of Trump's appeal is the idea that if we give this guy power, I don't exactly know what he's going to do with it, but he's going to use it to do something for people like us. And that is a very dangerous route for the country to go down. What did you see back then about Trump that just manifests today? And what is your evaluation of what's going on today with Trump? Clearly,
he didn't have any principles. Clearly, there were no convictions about this is the purpose of government. This is the role of the president. There was no ideas there. There was only a vow to fight. And what was he fighting for? Well, often it would be, basically it was the enemies of the religious right. I'm gonna fight the immigrants. I'm gonna fight the secularists. I'm gonna fight the left. And when all you know about somebody is that they're vowing to fight enemies and that they don't have any principled convictions, that's something to be handing that power to somebody, particularly handing arbitrary, unlimited power to them. That is a very dangerous thing to do. And I think where we are is you have somebody who's willing to look the limits on government power for over 100 years. In that sense, Trump wasn't new. It's not as if we had this kind of perfectly free society rooted in the rule of law and respect for individual rights, and then he overthrew it. It's that had been chipped away at, but there were what seemed to be pretty strong norms, at least, for how you weren't supposed to go after your political enemies with political power. You could lie, but you couldn't defiantly lie when it was obvious that you're just bullshitting. Yeah, like you had to pretend to be on the side of truth. You had to pretend to care about what was true and what was rational. Those norms have been washed away, and it's easier to tear things down than to build them up. And so the question is, what's the rebuilding going to look like? Assuming that we have the chance to rebuild and try to reestablish a limited government that has respect for the freedom of the individual. Right now, there's not many good signs to point to. The core thing that I think about is just, I still believe that there's people open to reason, and that a lot of what's going on today is that better people are fleeing into the hands of bad people because they think it's the only alternative to something that's even worse. And so can you offer them something better? And, by nature, I'm an optimist. It's getting really hard to be an optimist these days, but I try to hold on to at least the core of that optimism, which is it's not a blind, everything will be okay, but it's a real respect for human beings and a belief that, America's an amazing nation, and that there are, I hope, still Americans left, and that if you give them something better than what's around today, the hope is that they respond to it.
Let's turn for 1 minute to the left. I mean, a lot of people say, you don't have to like Trump, but he's the less of two evils. What do you have to say about, well, first, do you agree with that? Of course, I think the answer would be no, but what do you have to say about the left that preceded Trump? And what is your evaluation of that phenomenon that we saw in the Biden administration, that in a way Trump is a reaction to?
I mean, like I said, I think, both tribes are nihilistic, and certainly have like major nihilistic elements. And so my view is not like, I definitely have a view of which side is worse in the sense of a bigger short-term threat. But that's almost irrelevant, right? Because like my whole view is both sides are gonna like do fundamental damage. We need better sides. We need better people taking up the mantle on both parties. And so like that to me, like I have nothing good to say about the left per se. My point is not let's vote for Biden. My point is we can do better than Biden versus Trump. There's no reason that we can't do better than Biden versus Trump.
I want to move on to what success looks like. I mean, if you had to draw the next 3 to 5 years for you, what will success look like?
My personal mission in life is to help people learn, live, and advocate objectivism. That has taken many different forms, and from being a full-time intellectual to what I do now, which is intellectual work paired with fundraising and marketing for the Institute. I've had that personal mission for a long time, but since I've returned to ARI, I realized that even that is the real thing that resonates with me is much more, I want to help ARI make objectivism easy to learn, lead, and advocate. That ARI, since I was 15 and discovered the Institute, has a real personal meaning to me. And it's front and center of what I'm passionate about. And, what excites me over the next few years is, can we continue to make it like the best place to work, the best place to learn objectivism from? Can we continue to build the team of people who you'd want to go on vacation with, even when you're taking a break from work. So, to me, the next few years is really just about like, how can we find ways to bring Ayn Rand to more people? And for those who get ignited, how do we provide them with everything that I wish existed at the age of 15? Because I've said it for a long time. My basic kind of motivational force in life is always, what would 15-year-old Don have wanted when he discovered Ayn Rand, right? Like, all my books are the book I wish had existed when I was, 15 and discovering these ideas. And I think we've done a great job, right? Like, when I was 15, if you wanted to get one of the big courses from Leonard Peikoff, you would save up $200
Buy a cassette.
and buy cassettes that would be sent through the mail over a course of weeks. Now it's, you go on YouTube and there it is, right? But I think we can do even better. I think we can come up with cooler projects, better ways to get Ayn Rand in front of people, more compelling books and interviews and podcasts. Like, there's so much to do. And just as I said, like, I always take it like, if people aren't convinced we're not doing a good enough job convincing, like, the success over the next few years is just, we get 10 times better at convincing more people.
You keep on talking about Don, the 15-year-old. So my last question is, given everything you know today, if you were to go back and talk to the 14, 15-year-old Don, what is the one thing you would choose to tell them?
I'll answer in a second, but let me put it this way. I discovered Objectivism when I was 15. I didn't really know any objectivists for, 6-7 years after that. And I didn't really get to know the best objectivists until I came to work at the Institute about 10 years after that. And that was the most life-changing thing, just aside from discovering the philosophy itself. Before that, it was very lonely. I didn't know how to apply the ideas very well. I thought I knew way more than I did, so I wasn't learning as fast as I could have. The thing that I would say to 15-year-old me is, don't settle for people who are just okay. There's amazing people out there. Find the most brilliant, ambitious, innovative people you can, and just to know them. That, to me, has been the most day-to-day, life-enhancing, happiness-enhancing, learning-enhancing thing I've done. Is just surround myself by amazing people who I admire, who I learn from. That is the biggest upgrade, in life imaginable. And it took me too long to start finding really amazing people. And I could have done more to do it then.
Well, Don, it was a pleasure to hear you articulate a lot of great ideas.
Thanks
a lot.